Hey everybody, it's your girl Charlotte Van Horn, Black Expats in Panama and BEIP Tours. Listen here, listen here, listen here. I ain't got time to sit and chit chat and smile because I have an amazing man on with me today that I want to introduce the world to. David Hudson. He was on our BEIP number 34 tour in February in 2025. And since that tour, since the time that we've met, he's done so many amazing things in his life. He's really stretched himself. He wrote a book. I let him tell his story about his journey to Panama and everything like that, but definitely want to get into his book. He wrote a book called Creating Your Own Labels, which is something that I think we could all appreciate, the content and the wisdom and just him sharing his experiences with labels, especially today. And so I want you to hear more from him than you do from me today. So I haven't done an interview in a while, so I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here with you. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with David. So, Mr. Hudson, hello, my friend.
Hello, hello, and thank you so very much for the opportunity to share with you and others.
Yes, I am really glad to have you on. David and I were speaking earlier before we started recording, just talking about, energy that people bring and iron sharpens irons and iron. And to me, David is just one of those people who you just can't help but smile. I can't help but smile when I'm around him. I just absolutely love your spirit, your disposition. You're just so easy to love. And I just that's just how that's just the way I feel about you, baby.
Wow.
And
Well,
so tell us a little bit about yourself, David. Where you from and stuff like that.
I was born in South Carolina to a teenage unwed mother and was given up at birth to relatives. And then at almost 2 years old, I was taken from those relatives by my great grandmother, and she kind of continued the raising process with me in the house with my granduncle and his wife and their kids. So I spent the first 15 years of my life in South Carolina, and then went to New Jersey when I was 15 to find a job during the summer and live with an aunt there. And at that point, I kind of lived between New Jersey and South Carolina, and I was fortunate enough to I guess, go to college because of a guidance counselor who saw something in me that I wasn't aware of. Being very, very poor, college was never something that I thought would be a possibility for me. But she called me into her office and she asked me what if I go to college, would I? And I was like, I thought she was insane because of course I would. And her mother bought the first set of sheets for my bed for college, someone I didn't even know. So she
Guidance
made
counselor.
Yes, yes.
Was she black?
No, she was white. As a matter of fact, the counselors, my senior year was the first year the schools integrated, and the counselors at the black school had always encouraged me to try to get into a trade school because they knew my financial situation. So the bar wasn't set very high based on my grades and what was going on in my life, but they, didn't want me to set my expectations beyond what they thought that I should. But when the white counselor at the school reviewed my grades and everything, she saw something bigger for me and she kind of pushed me forward with that vision. So she was one of the first angels. I speak of angels that come into my
Yes.
life, like people like yourself, that are there
Mhm.
to encourage me and to help guide me and to help me see ways and to speak truth into me or speak things into me that I may not know about myself and to give me new labels about myself. So that was something that I think that what happened with that whole experience with Mrs. Gist is that I wanted to become a counselor and help people. And so when I went to college, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a counselor and I'm going to do what was done for me, not realizing that in order to become a counselor, I had to have a master's degree and beyond. So that dream kind of continued for a while, but then I was exposed to the IT and decided to change my career, I figured if I had money, then I could really help people. So IT gave me the opportunity after the first year, my salary kind of tripled. So I spent 25 years in New Jersey there, and then I spent 25 years in the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland. And then I moved to Atlanta 5 years ago. So the whole journey for me has been up and down the East Coast. Uh, I had this whole vision to move to Panama, and I started buying material and doing research on my own. And during this process, somehow I got exposed to you. And I think that it changed that whole fantasy of changing my life to a reality once I did the tour because you exposed me to things like the culture, the people, things that truly made a difference for me. And my dream became a reality when I went through the whole process of going on the tour. And my experience in Atlanta, the 5 years I've been here, has been one of growth and change for me. I encountered people because I truly believe that your vibe creates your tribe, that saying. And it's been amazing the number of people that have become a part of my tribe and those people who have encouraged me and have been helpers along the way. The whole concept of labeling, because it ties into the whole journey to Panama. And like you said, it kind of happened. The decision to make the change happened on the tour. And for me, I knew it was the right thing to do because all of the right things that have been done by you and the experience that I had on the tour. It was like I said earlier, the exposure to the reality, to the people, to the culture, to the possibilities. You brought it all together. So it wasn't like just a vision or something that I had in my imagination. It, there became a point in the tour that I knew that it was the right thing to do. And it was
Yes.
just so right, because all the things that you had done and all the things that happened on that tour within that short period of time.
Very short period of time. And sometimes it's like almost spiritual,
And it
and I
was.
want to I love all of that. And I just want to give a shout out to guidance counselors. I don't even know, what role they play nowadays I don't know what role they play nowadays in school. I mean, do they still have guidance counselors? But I had a similar experience. Very interesting. Like our lives are a little bit parallel in the sense that when I was oh my goodness, I was just so ahead of everybody in my school. When I was 15, 16 years old, my friends were 20 and 21,
Uh,
and I was running stuff. Okay. And by the time I got to I think, sophomore or junior year, I was just like, you know what? I am wasting my time here. I just need to go on and get my GED and just, move on with my life because I was so beyond the school bus and the school things and everything like that. And I went in, my guidance counselor's name was Mr. Grabelmi. I went to the smallest high school in New Jersey at the time. I don't know if it still is now. I know I always like to brag and say I graduated 14 in my senior class, but I never tell anyone there were only 85 students. Like, so, but I went to Mr. Grabelmi and I said, yeah, I just want to see what I need to do to take my GED. And my mother, she didn't care. My mother didn't have a degree or a high school diploma. So for mommy, for us to have a high school diploma, that was just like your key to success. Okay. And so when I went in there and he said, why would you do that? And I said, because I'm tired of being in school. I don't like it here. And, I just think I can do something else. And he said, well, you're too smart for a
mm,
GED. And he says, have you ever thought about vocational school?
mm,
And I said, no, not really. And he said, well, rather than you going to a GED, I'd like for you to try, to see if you would like a vocational school education. Make a long story short, that is how I started the career that took me my entire life. Mr. Grabelmi recommended the vocational school. I went there. I ended up getting into a business data processing or something like that. It was like we were writing languages. Remember back when everything first started? It was Key Punch. You might remember
Hmm.
that. It was Key
Oh,
Punch.
yes.
But what amazed
Yes.
me about the class when I went through the school was everybody worked independently. And
Mm,
I liked that. And so I decided to business data processing. I think that's what it was called. But anyway,
mm,
that was the path that got me on to being a secretary and ultimately being a legal secretary and a paralegal for the rest of my life, which, fed me well over the years. And he was also a white man. And
mm,
he had given some very racist advice, though, to others. And so when I tell that story about Mr. Grabelmi, they're like, wow, because
mm,
it just hadn't been that way for others. But getting back to what you said again, regardless of people's shortcomings or imperfections, there are people who have sown into my life and yours that have really made a difference. And
yes.
it's good to take a moment and acknowledge that.
Right. I think the bigger part of that picture, not only did she get me into college, but she figured out the financial piece of it. Because, like I said, I was very poor, no money, and I became an emancipated minor in order to qualify for some of the funding that was available because
Mhm,
I had no support from my family at all. So I had zero support. I went to 4 years of college without having any financial support from any outside sources other than grants and loans that I got. And Mrs. Gist was the one that kind of, she really worked hard to try to make things happen for me. And it
mhm,
was just one of those miracles that I considered a miracle in my life. And
mhm,
you're right, because I think without her encouragement or without her providing me with that option, my life would have turned out totally different. And
mhm,
the gratitude and that whole story is just when I go through those periods of doubt or
mhm.
self-doubt, I always have to remind myself of those stories that prove that I don't have to really be concerned about that because life has opportunities and I can choose whatever opportunities I want for myself.
Absolutely. I always say that we operate in the realm of possibilities,
Yes.
and every
Yes.
day creates a new possibility. Every
Oh, yeah.
day that we are on this side
Right.
of the earth is a new possibility. And the thing about opportunities is that opportunities a lot of times are plentiful. But it's
Mm.
just you being in the right place at the right time and making the right choice about that opportunity that is going
Yes.
to make the difference whether you actually get to take advantage of it or not. Opportunities are very fluid and
Mm.
they're always moving, and when you miss it, it goes to somebody else. But
Mm.
ultimately, David, I think what's for you is for you. And
Uh-huh.
some of the opportunities that I may have been presented or may not have been presented in my life, they would have been opportunities that actually killed me.
Mm.
I used to ask God for blessings always. It was all I needed was money, honey. Let me tell you something. All I needed from God was money. I was always, God, please, if you just get me out of this one. you know, and in hindsight, God has truly blessed us in our latter years, in my latter years in life. But in those early years, had He blessed me with any measure,
Mm.
um, that He's blessed me in these times, I would have squandered it. I could have
Mm.
maybe even hurt or killed myself with it. I
Mm.
wasn't ready for those opportunities. So it's just good to be able to recognize those things. So now that was when you were, but that was a South Carolina teacher, guidance
Yes, it
counselor, or
was.
was that Jersey?
Yes. Yes, it was South Carolina because I actually
What
finished high school in South Carolina before went to college also in South Carolina, but I would go back and forth to New Jersey.
So when you say that you didn't have the support from your family, it wasn't like they weren't happy for you to have the opportunity, but there was just no financial support.
Right. And I think that I was kind of like maybe independent or standalone. I was outside of I I see it like I describe it in my book and some of the stories is that I was kind of like not forgotten, but I wasn't the focus. And I accepted today that people had other things that they were concerned about.
Yes.
And because I was able to survive and make it through and really didn't require that kind of attention, I was kind of like a loner or kind of like that person that was just there. I was a child in the house. I was just, I don't know how to describe it, but uh, I see that they did the best that they could do, basically. And
Yes.
I always like to think that about people when I look back on past experiences. And today, something you said that really stands out is because what's important for me today more so than money, because I thought that money was going to be my way out because I never had it. And once I was able to acquire money, I had money, I was seeking things that brought me joy that was
Hmm.
brought about by money, but that has all changed through my lifetime. And
Hmm.
now I seek out those things that bring me joy.
Hmm.
And a lot of time it has nothing to do with money or
Right.
material things. And this whole move to Panama has kind of separated what it is that I valued in life and having to downsize and let go of all the things that I've accumulated to bring me that joy that money enabled me to be able to do is not really important anymore. And that whole change has been a spiritual awakening for me. And I
Yes.
think that there's enough joy to go around for everyone. And
Yes.
we don't have to hold on to joy or try to stop someone else from having their joy for
Yes.
our joy because there's more than enough. And when I'm around
Yes.
people like yourself or people that I've encountered in this whole experience that are joyful and encouraging, it's not because they're envious or jealous of what other people have. And I
Yes.
just love it when I'm in that energy field or surrounded by people who are
Hmm.
seeking those things that brings them joy and has most times nothing to do with how much money I have.
It has nothing to do. I believe that, I always say this, that of course the average North American makes more money than the average Panamanian. Of course. And a lot of times when we get here, we're here
Mm,
by choice. We are
mhm,
here because we're going to be able to afford to be here,
mhm,
whether you have a modest income or whether you have a great income. You're here by choice and you're
right.
here because you can afford to do so. So most of us have more money. But the thing is, David, what I quickly learned is that they have more peace.
Mm,
They have more peace
I've
and they
seen
have
it.
more joy
I
with
see
the
it.
things that they have. Whereas North America, I think we have been taught to be so focused on
Mhm.
material things. And
Yes.
then when you start this process of relocation, I had a meltdown. I had a meltdown when we were moving out of our Virginia home. You know, I for the last probably, I don't know, 15 years that I was in Virginia, we've always had homes that we just had a lot of space. So when you have
Mm.
a lot of space, one thing about that is nothing looks cluttered because you got a place to put everything. But then when it gets down to, okay, now everything in this house needs to be accounted for. It needs to be something you're going to keep, something you're
Mhm.
going to give away, something you're going to sell, then that becomes a whole nother story. You're like, what do I have all this stuff for? What do I
Mm.
have all this stuff for? Finding things that you've bought over 10 and 20
Mm.
times,
Mm.
just because you got so much. And it was, but downsizing, and I always say this to North Americans coming here, is downsizing is liberating.
Mm.
It is very liberating. Living in smaller spaces is at this point in my life comforting.
Mm.
Less
Wow.
to care for. Less to care for.
Well, that really speaks to me because of the fact that the size of the condo that I'm going
Mhm.
down to would be considered a micro condo. It's like a
It's like a
tiny
tiny
condo.
home.
Yes.
It's like a tiny house. Almost.
It's like less than 500 square feet. So
Yes.
for me, all those things that you're saying, because I think throughout my life that the material things have given me a sense of security or a sense of success, or, there was value added to it that I gave to those things because growing up very poor, having things made me feel not poor, or it took away
Right.
those feelings that being poor I thought gave me. But what I've realized with the downsizing effort that you're talking about,
Mhm.
I've been a big collector of art. There have been things that people have given me throughout years that I had emotional attachments to. So going through this whole process of downsizing and simplifying life has really been one of the most challenging part of preparing for the move because I mean, like what I'm going to be living in, when I came down the last time to visit, I did an Airbnb that was almost the size of the condo that I'm going to be in, just to
Mhm.
give me a feel for that whole experience of
Mhm.
downsizing to that size. And I'll tell you, it was like the first 3 nights, I was like, I can't live here. I got to go to a hotel. It's just too small. I can't. I just can't do it. And then I realized, Charlotte, as I settled in, I realized that all those things, all that space that I thought I needed, I didn't really need. It was just, I just didn't need it. I had been so used to it. And it had
Yes.
provided me a false sense of security all my life. It was like, there's no way. And then in the beginning, when I decided on a small condo there, and I would talk to people about it and share the size, they would come back to me, and especially most people from the US would say, "Oh, that's a small space. That's so tiny. How can you do it?" And then I realized that I was placing value on the size versus what the quality of life that I was searching for. And what you said, like I realized during the trips that I've made there since doing the tour with you,
Mhm.
that connecting with the people, because I'm determined not to be inside of a social bubble with
Mhm.
expats. I want to experience and relate and connect with the people.
That's
And I
it.
found last time I was there, I'm a fast walker. People say I'm almost like a run walker, but I'm always rush, rush, rush.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that I was walking slow and I could actually feel a breeze on a hot day. And it was like,
Wow.
oh, I'm around the people. I took the metro there, the train, and I just immersed myself in the people in the neighborhoods. I ended up in a neighborhood that they said, "Oh, you shouldn't go in a certain neighborhood. That's the worst neighborhood." And I was like, "Oh, I kind of accidentally went through that neighborhood, but I survived. But it was an experience because I felt the connection with the people, and
Yes.
every time I go." I always feel like it's so the right place for
It's the
me because
right thing.
because of that connection that I feel. And it's
Yes.
changing me in a lot of ways where I'm learning that there's a different way of living other than the rush, have, the instant gratification that I've been so used to here, the microwave kind of life, to just going and slowing down. So that's part of the whole moving to Panama that I'm looking forward to. I'm not trying to escape anything. I'm trying to
Mhm.
move into a new way of life that's going to support me,
Exactly.
way that's going to be, encouraging and positive in ways that I've never experienced before.
Okay, so we're going to circle back and tell them about your condo and how you got there. I want to touch on um the fact that you come and you connect. And that is the great thing and one of the unique aspects of the Beep Cultural Relocation Tour. It is about the connection. It's about the
Yes.
connection and it's about the culture. Anybody can show you neighborhoods. Anybody can
Yes.
show you neighborhoods, but not there. There's the connection and the culture from the very beginning, from the very first Zoom call, the connection with the people that are on the tour. First thing, right? Then it's like when you get here, the connection with the Panamanians,
Yes.
the connection with the Black expats who are already living here, the connection with the Black culture and history here, the connection with the history, period. I've heard of tours that don't give you Panama history. Not, just telling you where to live. I can't imagine that. And, this tour started from a very organic place. I've never was a relocation specialist or anything like that. But I'll go back to the fact that you decided to come on a tour. And so you were looking at some things and then I came up and then you decided to come on a tour, right?
Well, the whole decision, remember that whole thing, the story that you sometimes share with people,
Yes.
that decision was not one that I was willing or open to at a certain point in the whole journey. But the conversation that you had with me when you started speaking to me in those ways, when the fear came up in me and the uncertainty and everything came up, and the one conversation you had with me that changed all of that, that made it
Uh-huh.
possible for me to have that experience. And I think that a lot of tours sell a fantasy, they
Yes.
sell a dream to people.
Mm-hmm.
But your tour was totally different. Once I got there, I realized that it was much more than just a fantasy. It was a reality and it was a way
Mm.
of life. And you took us to places that it was like it was all about the people and the culture and the
Yes.
experience versus
Hmm.
the nice flashy condos with the ocean
Right.
view. It was much more than that.
Yeah.
And what I experienced in that short time that I was on your tour, I mean, it was just amazing when I try to share the things that I experienced on that tour. People were like, well, how long were you there? And I was like, it was just a few days. I was like, yeah, well, how long were
We
you
get
there?
a lot in, don't we? But we were on that Zoom call. I think that's the first time I saw you. And you was like, well, I'm going to come. I don't know. I feel like maybe you were on the fence at that point or something. You said, I'm
I
just going to
was.
come and I probably won't go to all the places that you guys go or something
Yeah.
like that. But I just basically felt like you were saying you were going to hop in and out. I'm like, well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Is that how you remember the conversation? And I was just like, no, you need to come on and do this.
Well, we had a conversation prior to that because I was going to
Okay.
back out even before the Zoom call. And we had a conversation that you told me the reasons why I should come when I didn't realize there
Okay.
were reasons that I should come. And I think that the thing that I was struggling with because I was saying, oh, I don't like forced socialization. I don't like being in groups that people are
Bruce.
just you and the hugs and they really don't mean it or feel it inside. So it's this whole forced socialization rule that I had that you totally changed for me because when I gave the speech at the end of the tour, and it was a laugh because it was a joke that like wow, my quiet private person,
Yes.
and on the tour where it was like wow, I became somebody totally different. But the conversation that you had prior to me getting on a call, and he was like, "Oh, just come, give it a shot," because I was like, Charlotte, I don't think I want to come, like, I know I'm gonna lose my money and everything, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't like you were trying to sell me anything. It was just that you were trying to just make it me aware that there was much more to it than what I was thinking that was gonna be involved in the tour. Like I said, I had bought books on Panama, watched videos and everything. And I was like, well, what is this going to do for me other than forced socialization? I'm going to be stuck with these people for all these days. We all going to have these phony smiles on and we're all going to pretend we like each other. And it was
Yeah.
totally not the case once I got there. And on the Zoom call, I did the first one. And I was like, oh, okay, there might be something to this. And I was like, your energy was like, it just blew me away. It was like the excitement and the joy that I could see coming from you. I was like, oh, wow, 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 this is something going on here. This is real. This lady is real. She's the real deal.
I don't know that I could remember our conversation prior to on the Zoom call.
Right. We had a
That is
phone
something,
call
and it's just because
conversation.
I talk to so many
I'm
people, but
sure
that's
you
just
do.
from my heart. I mean, it's just from my heart. I know that most people get here and they're blown away, and I love that. I really do love that. So you came in February 2025. There's probably about 20 or so people on your tour.
Right.
And you're still in touch with those people, right?
Yes.
We stay in
Yes.
touch. Those forced, what's it, forced
Socialization.
socialization. For those forced socialization people,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
adore them,
Right.
and they adore you. We stay connected. So when you came, I think you skipped Coronado. You
I
skipped
did.
it. Did you skip the Coronado day? And tell us why you skipped Coronado.
Well, I know that I'm an urbanite. I'm an urban type.
Right.
So anything outside of the city, I knew it wasn't going to appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so prior to that, I had already seen something that kind of appealed to me in a way. There
Uh-huh.
was a condo, that was part of the part of your tour that was, I think it was priceless. is that opportunity to go around and see possible living,
Yes, yes.
like the condo was being constructed. You
Mhm,
took us around the different areas. Like the first tour of the places, the real estate. We went
mhm,
to different areas, but then when I realized that there was a place that would really work for me and it was a good fit for me, I was like, oh, okay. I'm not a person. I like bus sounds. I like the urban sounds. I like walkable areas. I want everything to be convenient to me because I
mhm.
don't like driving, and I don't think I
Right.
would ever want to drive in Panama City. Seeing the way
Yeah.
that they drive there, it's
Yes.
like,
Oh my God.
okay, no. But no, so that's why I skipped the second part of the tour to look at places to live because I had already made a decision at that point that I wanted to live in a city, and you had already exposed us to the possibilities of living in a city and what the options that were available at that time.
But to make a long story short, you had put a contract on a place before you left.
Right? That was a part of accepting that Panama was the destination for me based
Yeah.
on what I had already experienced.
Yeah.
And I knew that the thing about the condo is like I wanted to be like on a certain floor. I wanted I had different requirements. And the unit that I was interested in and would have wanted, it wasn't available, but that unit fell back on the market while I was there. So to
Oh,
me, it was a sign that, okay,
another sign.
this is for me, So I had no problem reaching a decision at that point because I knew that that was the right thing for me to do.
But that is just absolutely amazing. And when you think about it, you're in the final stages of getting the keys and having your place completed, right? And it's only been a
Yes,
little over a year ago.
yes. When I first saw the building, there were only 6 floors that they had completed at that time. And it's a 12-story building. So during the past year, I've had an opportunity to see the plant grow from the roots below the ground. Like the
Mhm.
seed was planted with you, and this is like
Mhm.
I'm seeing the plant and the harvest of it. So I've seen the building, and I'll share pictures with you at different phases of construction.
Yes.
Like, the last time I was there a month ago, I got the opportunity to actually see inside the unit. And what was again amazing about that, because the 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 I guess the generated images that had been done of what it would look like from the unit turned out to be totally different than what it was when I walked through the door the first time. It was like
Okay.
it was sold as an ocean view, but from the graphics that were there before, it was like, okay, it's a tippy toe, that is the ocean over in that corner kind of thing. But when I walked into the condo for the first time last month, it was an ocean view and it blew me
Wow.
away. So it was much better than I had even imagined.
Wow. And an
And
ocean view is an ocean view, no matter what size unit you're in.
true, true.
And
And
then you'll
and
have, so that if you have the ocean view, the one thing about Panama City is that once you say you're going to have a city view, regardless, right?
right,
But when you say that you have an ocean view, what that means is that you got views all day long. You
true.
got views all day long. You have beautiful views all day long. You can see the water during the
Right.
day and you can see the city lights at night. And Panama's nighttime view is just lovely as well. So
Yes.
you did that. Congratulations to you. I mean, that was a big
Thank you.
deal. That's
Yes.
definitely a big deal, David. I'm so proud of you, and I can't wait for you to be here more often. Will you keep a base in the United States? Will you go back and
Well,
forth or
my ideal situation would be like I'm not disconnecting totally with the US.
yes?
Um, I would love to have a base in the States and primarily be based out of Panama, but I'm still working on that part of the vision or the dream. But that's what I have in my mind to do that. But for this phase of or this step, it'll be Panama only, and then I'll be
Mhm.
making trips to the US. Uh, Hopefully, I'll be closing on the purchase of the condo next month, and then I'll be transitioning full time to Panama before August when my lease is up here in Atlanta. But Atlanta has been wonderful for me, and I love Atlanta. And I don't want to disconnect or
Yes.
give up on the States because there's so much good that I've experienced here. And I think that there's still a whole lot more good that I can experience. I don't have to give up one life to have another life.
And what I like about this is that the other thing is your plan does not have to be, all the stars do not have to align in order
True.
for you to make some moves. You're like, okay, I've decided on this part. The other parts will come together. I mean, you got a baseline plan and a baseline idea, and you know that you have the wherewithal, to execute. Whatever it
Right.
is that you want to do, but you can allow yourself the grace of allowing that to happen naturally,
Right.
or like you may find something, you may get here when your place is ready and then make another choice. But for me and for a lot of people, I don't like being in the States anymore. I feel like being in the United States, for me, I just don't know how to be. I don't know how to be there anymore. So much has changed in the last few years, and I just don't know how to be there. I feel um, like when I went to Egypt. When I went to Egypt, I was so uptight about Egypt because the culture is so different than what I'm, exposed or aware of. And I was just so afraid of doing the wrong thing, like, and really be seriously offending someone or something like that, just out of ignorance. And I almost feel that way about the United States now, that I don't know how to be. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how to be because the rules have changed so significantly. Okay, so that's kind of how I feel about that. But with that said, we should be very careful about disconnecting with the United States. And I tell people that when you decide to disconnect, you need to be very strategic and you know what you're doing. People are disconnecting on certain levels for certain things, but there's a lot of legal and tax implications that you need to make sure you understand. And so that's what I always say. And I would never recommend, pulling your money out of the US ever. I mean, at this point, based on what I know right now, and then you have people talking about, well, I'm considering giving up citizenship, and I'm wondering if even giving up citizenship, how does that affect your Social Security? Because you got people here who, your Social Security that you've worked for and earned, you're getting that. A lot of people here on government pensions. How is it that would be affected if you just abandon your U.S. citizenship? Because people talk about that, and so I think that it's almost like being in a marriage that you're too deep into to leave.
Right.
Y'all might could be separated,
Yeah.
but it ain't no divorce happening.
Yeah.
I can't see
It's
that for myself at this time. But I also like the fact that you are going to something. You're not
right.
running from something.
True. True.
And to tell you the truth, we live in a day of serious headline hysteria. In our business, it's like you never know from one day to the next, how people are going to be feeling about travel, or how
Right.
people are going to be feeling about relocation because it's headlines. What are they doing now? Is this safe or whatever? It's just, headline hysteria. So people start making decisions without really counting up the cost, without really doing the research. Like you had already been doing the research, and then you came and what you had was a practical experience. You had done all of the reading and the foundation, but you came here and you had a real practical experience, whereas you can read about Panama all your life
Right.
and you may touch down here, and something in your spirit just says, no,
Mm.
this is not what I thought it was. I don't think this aligns with me and what I want to do. So you have a lot of people who are fleeing, and I think
Right.
that's not a good place to be.
Well, for me, I still have people here that I love and play
Hmm.
important roles in my life. So to just disconnect totally from those people, it's
Yeah.
it's different. And and I think that I always consider myself as a wisdom seeker. So traveling, visiting different places, like you say, the experience may not be, the greatest or a positive experience, but it's an experience. It makes me like there are places that I know I don't want to go again, but if I had not had that experience, I never would have known that. And I think for me, the connection and the love that I have from the people that are here in the States, then there's no way I could just cut that off. And
Yeah.
it's like there's no reason why I can't have both or multiples. I see
Right.
it as an enhancement.
Yeah.
It's not replacing me. Panama is enhancing me.
Hmm.
And that's the way I see it because the United States, my whole experience here has provided me with lots of opportunities and a good life.
Hmm.
And what I have to do is be able to filter out. I think that the thing that I noticed most when I went to Panama to visit is I tuned out to all the news, because people are being bombarded daily with
Yes.
all the negative news and it's garbage in, it goes garbage out. And I mean, I don't have to be controlled by the situation. I mean, I do have to live the life and I know what's going on. I'm not in denial about what's going
Right.
on, but I don't have to obsess on it. And I don't want to. I don't want to
Hmm.
spend every waking moment of every day worried about what's going on, especially those things that I have no power to change. I have to
Yes.
reach a point what I'm powerless over and what I'm not. So social media, the news being constantly bombarded, where there's no joy in that for me.
No.
And I found that being
No.
in Panama, I had an opportunity to get away from that. And it didn't, things didn't explode, things didn't go bad just because I got
Yes.
away from it, just because I
Yes.
turned it off. And so
Yes.
being able to turn it off versus being able to try to eliminate it totally.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely with you on that. I like the fact that, my family, everybody got passports. As long as everybody got passports, we can always, see
Mm,
each other. But, you have to have the passport. But let me ask you this. I'd like to talk to you about your book
okay.
and talk to you about your book. And oh, one thing I wanted to ask you. So what is your structure? Do you have kids? Are you married?
I'm solo, me both
Okay.
solo.
Hmm. Yes.
And it was a decision that I made. When people ask me about that, when I was younger, I always thought I had to come up with a story because it was expected, there are certain expectations of people.
Yeah.
And that's just not the life that was meant for me.
Mm.
And, like not having children, I think that I play a role in a lot of other children's lives.
Yes.
And, I think that anybody can make a baby nowadays.
Yes.
Technology can allow anybody to make a baby and have children, but I don't think everybody could be a good parent.
Yes.
There had to be, I reached a point in my life where like I love kids, but I love them maybe 3 hours at a time, and that's real for me. I could have made a choice to have kids, but there were things that I accepted, and I'm still going through the self-acceptance piece of my life and who I'm supposed to be versus who other people think that I should be. So no, I've been
Perfect
single,
segue. That's a perfect segue to the book.
right?
Because that
Yeah,
is what the book is exactly about. It's like the labels that people put on you and the expectations.
for
And, I
sure.
love hearing you say that because, women, they really, really have a lot of expectations on them. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to have children. You're supposed to
Yeah.
love being a mother. You know what I mean? And that is just expectations that people place on us. But being able to say, that's really not the life that I want for myself. So
Right.
knowing that about you and then seeing how you were able to make this decision for yourself, to invest. in another country, because you're not
Yeah.
just coming here, you're not just saying I'm going to rent a space. No, you
Right.
invested, brother. And
Right.
that is another, a thing that, I mean, it takes a lot of confidence, a lot of courage, because you're going to have people say, well, you need to try this neighborhood, you need to try that neighborhood. But
Mhm.
you know what you said, I've seen enough. I
Yeah.
know I'm going to like this. Same with
Right.
me, David. Me and my
Yeah.
husband came here. I'm in my home right now. It'll be we closed on our home in November 2012.
Wow.
So I guess we're getting ready to be 14 years. 14
Wow.
years in our house. And it was the only house we ever saw.
Wow.
Never saw another unit, never actually saw this unit. We saw the model home,
Wow.
and the rest was all dirt. They literally had, I think, one half a street done in the entire community. We
Mm.
came here, and I just can remember. I'm gonna post that picture one day when I remember. I just can remember we went in this model home, and I took a picture of my husband looking through the window in the stairwell. And something in my spirit said, we're gonna live here.
Wow.
We're going to live here. And we put a deposit on that house that day. That day, the house that
Okay.
we'd never seen.
Similar
But we
stories,
put a
huh?
contract, a contract. We put a contract for them to hold a space. Excuse me. But what I didn't know and realize until later was where he was looking out of that window in the stairwell was directly as where our house would be.
Wow.
It's literally, when I go by the house every day, I see that. He stood there and he was looking out, and all it was red dirt. But where
Yeah.
we would end up having a home here, he was looking directly at it. It was right down that street. He was
Wow.
looking, so we've never ever regretted it. Not for 1 minute did we look back. But I got off the subject, but we were talking about labels. So tell me, your book is creating your own labels.
Right.
You self-published.
Yes. Yes.
You
Yes, I am.
self-published. And so tell us how the book came about. When did you publish it? And just, let us know what it's about.
I was I think, at a point right before the tour that I was trying to decide what was my purpose because it continues to change throughout my life. I've always been realized that I'm here to help other people. So I volunteer, I give back, I do what I can do because that's who I am. And I got that example from my adopted mom. She was always a giver. She was always helping other people. So those kinds of things make me feel good. When I help other people, it makes me feel good, and that's part of what brings me joy. But there was a part of me that I've always struggled with, and I like to say, that I always had to struggle with myself and accepting myself and not feeling like I was totally happy with myself. And I realized that it had to do with labels or that were placed on me by other people. And I think that we all are labeled, even from birth. We label kids, we call them, good kid, bad kid, smart kid, dumb kid, stupid kid, whatever. So we start out in life where we're given labels by other people. And I think the thing with labels is like we need labels to identify and determine who we are, but we don't always have to take labels that are given to us as those labels that we accept to be the labels that tell us who we are. And it's like having a bottle without a label on it. There could be anything in that bottle, without a label. It could be vodka, orange juice. I mean, if it's not color, it could be anything. So we
Yes.
come without labels. We come into this life without labels, and we're like a blank slate, as most people
Right.
say. So when I reached a point where I realized that it was the things that happened that changed my life was about me choosing labels for myself or different labels. And when I reached that point or started going through the process of relabeling myself, then my life started to change. I could label myself as joyful without having to really see the external joy that sometimes is equated to being joyful. So I think that the movement of creating your own labels was just such a simple thing that came to me. It was like this whole thing. Well, what's going on in my life? I think it was at a point where I was like, labels were changing and new labels were coming in. And with those new labels, I was changing. That I was finding more joy. I was finding more happiness. And so I feel, oh, this is such a simple, like I've read maybe 100 self-help books, if not more in my lifetime. But I realized reading those books a week or two later, I couldn't even recall what I had read in those books. So I think the whole concept that I think that applies and the movement that I'm trying to do with creating your own labels is that it's something that can be applied immediately, or you can make those changes right away. You don't have to lose 50 pounds to see yourself as being healthy
Mm-hmm.
or being fit. A lot of the things involves change that's in the future, but when you choose your own labels, it's something that's in the present that you see yourself at as right away. And for me, it was like the stories that I kind of shared in a book was around how I got those labels that no longer served me and how I worked through it and what I had to do to kind of change those labels and things that helped me. It's all about sometimes the messenger comes in different forms. And for me, it has been like just a whole bunch of messengers coming to me and doing this process of changing the way I choose or chose to see myself in the past was all about changing the way I labeled myself. And sometimes it's hard to see the labels when you're inside the bottle too. So it had to come about by other people sharing labels with me that I really couldn't see about myself. Like people like you encouraging labels, when the voice of fear was screaming in my head, you screamed labels at me that was louder. They were louder than those labels that were being screamed at me. So I think that what I shared in the handbook, it's called a handbook because I feel that it's a living movement and that there are things that are going to happen or things that I'm going to need to share or things that I will learn from other people that will also be a part of what could be used to help other people. So I think that me just sharing how me choosing my own labels or deciding to choose those labels that were positive or work for me actually changed my life. So I think that that was a foundation when I realized that, yeah, I don't have to keep those labels that were given to me. I could choose. I could choose my own labels. And you could choose yours too. Everybody can choose their own labels. It's like, why do you have to believe what someone else says about you if it's not true, if it doesn't serve you any longer?
Yes, and I think, but what you say, it's hard to see your label from inside the bottle. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's hard. I mean, from inside the bottle, because we're always looking out from ourselves.
Yeah.
Other people are looking at us.
Right.
And I remember one time this gym teacher, her name was Miss Anderson, and I think there was a thing that was going on with her legally because they were trying to fire her, and I don't
Mm,
know what her issue was, but back in the day, like severe obesity was just not a thing. There was
mm,
not a thing. I can remember in the small high school that went to, I can remember. I mean, maybe five severely obese children
mm,
in our school. Well, this gym teacher was extraordinarily obese, and she, back then there weren't clothes for people that were super obese and everything, and her clothes were just like big. Her clothes were made and they were just big. But anyway, she put a label on me, and I think that I didn't like her because she asked us to do things that there's no way she could have done.
mm,
And I like, who you telling? What?
mm,
Sometimes I'd be like, what you doing? That's when she would get real mad at me because I didn't
mm,
like Jim.
mm,
And but one time she told me, she said, when you're good, you're good.
mm.
She said, but when you're bad, you're very bad.
Oh, wow.
And bad was a label. Bad was
Mm,
my label.
for
I
sure.
I was the bad one. I
Mm,
was the youngest child of five. And I was that one. I could cuss you out big time by 6, which meant other people around me was cussing. But I knew how to put some words together. Okay. Round 6. And I just was never the kind of person that was going to have myself not like something and not say I didn't like it. I've never been, a lot of young girls are, molested or, treated inappropriately by family members and friends. That has just never been my experience. And I think it was just because of the way I was. They knew that I was that one. I would tell, I would fight, but I was called bad. And even at this time, I go back to um, my hometown, and they say you're Charlotte's baby, right? Because I was I'm named after my mother, and they say to this day, I swear to you, like even up to the last time I've been on, you was the bad one, right?
This-
you know.
yeah, 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 I love it. I love it. And that whole inside the bottle thing was shared. A friend shared that with me about a week ago because I get different feedback from people who I have the conversation with or read the book. But I had thought about it in a lot of ways. But the other thing is that we don't need permission from others to choose another label. Like
Yes.
you realize that the bad label was not one of your choosing.
Mhm.
And I could see you as being maybe I wouldn't say bad, but interesting, and just Charlotte. And that's so great because that's why you are who you are today. But you're not bad. I mean, you have a good heart. You've never been bad, But yeah, I think it's important to realize that we get to choose and we don't need permission to choose.
Or you can take that and look at it in another way. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm a badass. I'm a
Yeah,
badass. Don't come for me unless I send for you kind of
right.
person. But I'm not bad in the way that, some kids could take that. And
Oh
I
yeah.
can remember I can remember my mother or grown-ups talking about kids
Hmm.
and saying that they were bad. I can remember my mom
Hmm.
never said people weren't going to amount to anything, but I can remember people hearing that. Talk about labels, David. People will label you with your parents.
Oh, right, 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 right. There are many reasons why we all of a sudden end up with labels that are given to us, depending upon some crazy circumstance or certain situation. My whole big thing now is that I am who I say I am. It's no matter what anyone else or say I am I am who I say I am. So I get to choose who I am and the labels that are associated with myself.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Genesis chapter.
Well, the Genesis chapter, if you notice from the book, it occurred around the February timeframe, when it was actually being birthed, was a part of the tour, was a part of that whole Genesis thing. When I moved to Atlanta, I knew that I would, all of a sudden I started encountering people who were helping me to kind of understand or see things a different way. It was all about changing labels before I even knew that I was changing labels and what the process, what was happening to me. And I would hang out in an area near where I lived. That was an open area that would be vendors because I've always felt through life that vendors are the messengers or people that we encounter, are people that sometimes deliver the messages that we have because they have encounters or random encounters with people that they would never encounter. The shopkeepers, the vendors going back in the day, so it was all kind of that way. So I met a lot of people hanging out on the greens. I met this one guy, and he had been performing magic when I came to visit, like maybe 14 years prior, and he was still there performing magic. And as I got to know him, I realized that he did a whole lot more to just perform magic, that he helped people with public speaking. He helped people coach people in a lot of different ways. So I would have conversations with him. I was working a job that I wasn't really happy at, but it provided a paycheck. It provided me the money to buy those things that I thought would bring me happiness and joy. And so I knew that there was something else inside of me or something else that I wanted to do. I didn't know what. It was like I was just confused. I was like, I don't know what. I don't know what I want to do. I know what I'm doing is not what I want to be doing. And, but I need the money. I need the paycheck. As long as I work, I get the paycheck. So I was kind of like a prisoner to that kind of whole thing of being attached to a job that I really didn't like. And after I made the tour, the trip down, and decided to make the move, I lost that job. So it was like, okay, I'm forced to do something different now. I'm forced to make another choice. I had gone to the workshop that this guy had given for people that were trying to be public speakers. But I was like, I don't know if I want to be a public speaker. I don't know if I really have anything to say that people want to hear. It was all those fears and doubts, self-doubts that I created for myself. But I think when it all came together, the total package of the tour and knowing that I needed a change and what was my life going to be like, I think it just came through. It was like a spiritual awakening. I like to tell people I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And I
Spiritual.
think that
Me too.
the things that happen in a lot of ways, like that whole experience with you and your house, it was like very similar to my story,
Yeah.
how that whole living thing. But there's spirituals, I think, situations that happen. So it all kind of came together with the experience of the tour, with the people I met on the green. I lived in a condo building that was 46 stories high. The people I met there, they would invite me to dinner, we'd have conversations, we'd have brunch. We'd end up talking for 4 hours. But it was not only just talking, it was what was being said that made a difference. Like I was hearing the message. The messengers show up in many different forms, but these people were like screaming the message to me. It was like, okay. And I was like, oh, wow, wow, wow. The light would come on. And then I would like digest it. And I was like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. This is really, really speaking to me in many different levels. So I think that it was a combination of everything that happened in 2025 around that time that I did the tour, that this whole movement, an idea was actually birthed. It had been growing under the ground as a seed that was there,
Yes.
but it didn't really break through until last year.
So then you decided to start to write the book.
Well, the book was kind of like later on in the process because I realized in writing a book that I had to get very honest, not only with people, but with myself.
Okay.
So it took me to a level of processing. I'll tell you, when the book went to be reviewed or finalized for publishing, it was like I went through 3 days of like not knowing what was going on with me. I was like, I don't know if it was a depression or was fear overcoming me, but it was like I was putting it out there. I consider myself a very private person. I share what I want to
Yes.
share as
Yes.
a need to know. It's always a need to know. People ask me questions about myself, and I always like, well, what is your need to know? Is what I'm thinking in my
Yeah.
head. It's like if you really have a need to know, then I don't mind sharing with you. But if you don't have no need to know and you just being nosy, then hey, no, we won't go there. We won't have that conversation. Uh, but when the movement was birthed, it was like I would wake up in the morning, Charlotte, and it was like ideas would just be coming through. Before I get out of bed, I'd have the pen in hand and I'd be writing things down, and it was like it was just nonstop, and the energy was there. It was almost like I was drinking caffeine all day, kind of feeling, and it wasn't. And it was just stuff that was coming through. And when I share with people and they say, oh, yeah, yeah, you really, really helped me, I feel like it didn't come from me, it came through me. And the things that I share sometimes are not even things that I'm aware that I'm sharing. But, there are things that sometimes help other people. And the book was that part that I felt like would reach an audience broader or bigger than me and the encounters that I would have with individuals. So I felt like the book was going to be an important piece. There's much more to what goes with the book. It's like it's an opportunity to apply things and to give people different ways that work for me. Like I have these magnets on my refrigerator because I had a vision board in the past, and vision boards, yeah, they work and everything, but I don't see that vision board when I get out of bed in the morning because it was in my bedroom. I did these magnets that I made myself with my new labels. I put them on the refrigerator. I'm in the refrigerator a lot. So I see them often. So that was something that I put in a book that just, hey, this is something simple. This could help you. It doesn't cost you a lot. Do this, try this. The things like a mirror exercise that I would do it myself. I had a friend that there was a point in my life where I was very, very down, very, very low. And she saw that something was going on. She grabbed me and took me into the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. She said, "Look in that mirror. I want you to tell me what you see." And she was like, like doing one of these things with the mirror. And it was hard. It had always been hard for me to look at myself in the mirror and really look at myself because I didn't like what I was seeing in the mirror.
Wow.
So I had to really change the labels from the image that I was seeing in the mirror to actually be able to appreciate myself. But there were certain things that I felt like I needed to share with people that worked for me. And it may not work for everybody, but if there's one person that could get something that works for them, then I would have accomplished what I set out to do, you know?
If you were still on that job, you
Oh,
probably
right.
would not have this book.
No, 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 I would not.
Because not being on the job, it gave you the ability
Yes.
to free your mind, to be able to wake up in the morning. Listen, I pray for witty ideas and inventions. I do. And in the morning, like when you say when you wake up and all these ideas are coming to you, that's when the Holy Spirit speaks to me.
Right,
That's when
right.
I get all my good information. What I've learned as an older woman now, is that I can't, I don't allow people to do things that don't sit well with me. You can't be in my life and do things that I don't like and mean I
Mm,
tell you. However,
mhm,
karma, I will sleep on some stuff now,
mhm,
and try to make sure that when it comes out, that it's not, fire,
mhm.
because people do things and it's not always intentional.
Right.
And I give you that first, I give you the benefit of the doubt first, but just being free. And then once you get to Panama, people have moved here, David, and written books, taken up
Uh-huh.
guitar lessons,
Amen.
tapped into the artist and the creative parts of themselves that they hadn't seen or never met, hadn't seen in a long time or had never met. And it goes back to that peace. I think that, there's a lot of noise in our head
That's what I
when
was thinking.
stressed out about things and everything like that. But when you
Yeah.
know that, you're in the right space
Right.
and you're walking through this process. I think that, and when you have, and again, I'm not a religious person either, but I'm very, very spiritual, and I love the Lord. But even with all that's happened with our company is 5 years old. And I mean, first of all, for independent businesses, the last 5 years is a huge plus because a lot of them don't, and for us to have been able to take the business and make it into this whole community and global outreach,
Mhm.
is one thing. And then to be able to expand the business. And every day God has given me new ideas and new opportunities that if I was still doing some of the things that I was doing, I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be able to, my mind, and I wouldn't be able to be open to it. So tell me, just if you could think of anything off the top of your head, tell me what was a label. Give me a label that was given to you, assigned to you, and give me a label that you assigned to yourself.
Okay. I think the one that comes right away based on our conversation that we had so far was there were times in my life where I was given the label as a bad child, that I was that bad child.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, my actions could have been considered bad, and I think that the thing that you said about people just then, because it really it resonated with me, is like the acceptance piece. Like if I learn to accept myself and learn to accept myself, I have to accept others for who they are. And sometimes it doesn't match up with who I am, the values and everything, but I can't allow that to become a part of me being angry or me being bitter or me being sad or me being whatever. So the label of bad child, I realized that I wasn't a bad child. So when I do these exercises for myself, I was doing this thing, going back and talking to little David, that little sad, little abandoned, little whatever the labels were on that little David. When I go back I change those labels as the way I see that little David, and I give
Mm.
him new labels. It doesn't change the reality of the situation because my story is my story, but it
Mhm.
also helped me to see that a lot of those labels that were associated with the little David does not apply. And it's definitely not the David that I am today. And I think it would mean the whole process is just like every day I say to myself to expect the unexpected best. And sometimes with decisions that I make, and I struggle with this, I don't know how much I should hold back and how much I should just trust in the process. I feel like a lot of times if I don't do it, it ain't gonna happen. I got to do that. And I've learned that sometimes the answer of what I get is better for me than what I asked for or would have asked for or would have tried to. So I think that the label that I used to be very sad, very, I guess, depressed for whatever, because I was going through a lot of things of self-acceptance and everything. So now that sad is happy. The label that I replaced with sad today is happy. You know, the label that I replaced with, like I'm struggling with like, oh, I feel like I'm fat. I feel like I got a big stomach. I feel like this, this whole body stuff going on. But the label that I choose for myself is healthy, fit, and God made us in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. So it's like not one size fit all. And just because I have a stomach doesn't mean that I'm not healthy or that I'm not fit. And I have to realize that and accept that as a positive in my life. So I
Yes.
think it's the little labels that I get up, like I get up with a blessed label as opposed to feeling like I wasn't blessed as a child,
Mm.
blessed now. So that label has changed for me. Uh, a label that was just given to me just recently, just this past week, a few days ago, was someone said to me, "What you're doing with Panama is very courageous." And I was like, wow, I never thought of myself as being courageous
Yeah.
through this process. And I'm like, now I'm courageous. So that's a new label I have for myself. He said, it took a lot of courage, or it takes a lot of courage to do what I'm doing. And you know it
Yes.
because you work with a lot of people who've gone through the process. It was like saying, well, old, I'm too old. I'm like, I'm never too old. Like, what is old? Old to me is I don't get that. I don't get it. I could do whatever I want to do. It has nothing to do with my age. Age appropriate is
Absolutely.
applies to certain things, but it doesn't apply for me making those decisions or doing what I need to bring me joy. So
Courageous.
courageous is
Courageous.
courageous. Yep, was one
That
that.
is that's 100% true. So tell us, um, you know, how do we get the book?
Well,
Do
it's
you have
available.
a copy of it there with you?
I do.
Yes.
It's available on Amazon.com.
Mhm.
And because of you, Charlotte, it became a Kindle version. So I remember when I spoke to you about the book, and you were like, well, and then you and a few other people, Emma was like, well, we only read digital books nowadays, and I think that I was more drawn to the paper hard copy because I wanted people to be able to take notes and write. But I know that a lot of people only want the digital version. So it's available
Yes.
on Amazon.com, creating your own labels, both the hard copy and the Kindle version. And like I said,
Yes.
thanks to you, Charlotte, for that. I went ahead and did what I needed to do to make sure that a Kindle version would be available.
So and before we go, I just want you there's an angel story in your book.
Mm.
Can you just tell us about that?
Well, when I was growing up, because my biological mom, I never really had a relationship with her. And when she transitioned or passed away, I was speaking to a friend and she said to me, she said, well, your mom is doing more for you on the other side than she could do for you in life. And I was like, oh, that was a good thought. That's a good, that's a feel good idea or thought. And I was like, yeah, yeah, there have been signs. And her address was 424 North 13th Street in Fort Pierce, Florida. And that's where she lived when I was a child. When I write her letters, she write me right. So the 424 has some significance for her. And then I realized that there were people who showed up in my life that were there to give me guidance and encouragement. When I reached those points where I'd be going through some fearful situation, you know, there would be people who just show up. So I started grouping them as my 424 angels, which
Mm.
you are part of that group. So
Aw.
for me, it's like those people who have played a special role in encouraging me and helping me. along the path because I feel like sometimes I'm in a car and I'm at a traffic light and I'm stopped and the light is red. And then there'll be someone to come along and they'll tell me something, the light will turn green and I will go. And I need those people in my life. I need those people screaming encouragement at me like you do. When we have conversations, like I'll be going through a little doubt, a little fear, and then all of a sudden I have a conversation with you, and I'll be like, oh, man, I could do this. I could do this, right, So those angels are the group of people that I recognize and acknowledge as those people who have helped me at this point through the process to be a better person, to be all those things that I label myself as today. Those people have given me labels that encourage me, and it's just been a wonderful thing. So it's just happy for me to be able to acknowledge and group it. I even have a tattoo on my arm, 424. So I'm committed to the 424 angels and those people involved.
So, like, who do you think? I mean, when you think about this book, like, who do you think is going to get the absolute most out of it? I mean, I think it's a very good subject matter, and I think that all of us can get so much out of this. Even this conversation, I've been sitting here and I'm writing. I've been writing things that I label myself.
Okay. Okay.
And you don't really think of how do you label yourself.
Mm-hmm.
This is making us think about how do we label ourselves. Like I had a lady one time and she offended me so bad because she
Mm-hmm.
was a single mom. And no offense to single moms, but listen, sometimes being a single mom is better than being a mom with somebody who ain't got your back and ain't going to help your situation. It's not going to be a good influence on your children. At the end of the day, being a single mom has never been an illness for me. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, I've been with my husband since my daughter was 6, but it always just, I don't like it when people label themselves that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like it when, they say, I'm a single mom. Who gives a shit? I
Right.
don't care. I don't care how many people are parenting your kids.
Right.
I mean, and it's not that I don't mean for that to sound cold, but it's not who you are.
Right.
It's not who you are. You're a mom. The fact
Right.
that you're single is just another element of that.
Yeah.
But most importantly, you are a mom. And I don't know. It's something about that label. And then,
Mhm.
and I'm not even gonna lie. Not even gonna lie. I was never able to really like this person again because you know what she said? She used to always say, I'm a single mom, I'm a single mom, I'm a single mom. Do you know she opened her mouth and she was making an introduction and she says, I'm a single grandmom. Damn it! When are you going to let it go? Like, oh my God. So
Right.
now, not only was the father not there, the grandfather's not there. I ain't never
Wow.
in my life heard no mess like that. I'm a single
Wow.
grandmom. What does that mean?
Wow.
Does it mean that maybe you're saying that because you're taking care of your kids? But
Right.
where do I don't like that.
Yeah, I think that labels sometimes limit us at boxing sand because I like to tell people who try to attach labels to me that I'm David. That's the label I own up to. I'm David because that's the label that you know me by, and I own up to it. Any of those other labels that are restrictive, the whole thing about single moms, you're a mom. Like you said, you're a mom. And if you're a good mom, you're a good mom, whether you're married or not, you're a mom.
Yes.
And that's the
Yes.
label that I associate with moms. It's like
Yes.
whether you're single or whether you're married, if you're a good mom, you're a mom and you're a mom. And
Yes.
that's what's important. It's not whether you're single or married mom. I think it's whether or not you're a good mom. And I think that the fact that people don't sometimes realize and they accept those labels that are given to them and they tend to label themselves with labels that they think that other people expect them to give to themselves, then yeah, they end up being stuck with those labels because sometimes it's by choice. And just like you could choose whether you keep them, you could choose whether you get rid of them at any point in life. And and so that's the way I feel about it.
Well,
I
but
understand what you're
like
saying.
like I was saying too, though, I feel like this book is a book that can definitely help or everybody can connect to. Okay,
But
regardless of who you are, where you are in your walk of life, because those labels change all the time. But did you think about any particular person or demographic when you were writing this?
it's interesting that you would bring that up because I think about it a lot. Because originally, what I did, there's a story in the book, The Front Porch, was what kind of triggered part of the book. Was my great grandmother, and as she was older, and we lived in the city, and she would spend her whole entire day sitting on the front porch. And so I didn't realize that part of her sitting on the front porch had nothing to do with the labels that I associated with her sitting on the front porch because I thought it was like, boy, I never want to be sitting on the front porch when I reach that point in my life. And for me, it's like when I encounter people in my age group or older, I sometimes feel like they've given up on life and they're just living with the labels that they've been given or living with the labels that they think society expects them to have. So the audience was like, I was thinking, well, maybe older people, to know that still got a lot of life to live. Life is exciting. I never want my age to define me. And people like, you young in spirit. Like I said, yeah, I'm going to always be young in spirit as long as I can be, active and alive. I'm going to be young in spirit. Even when I can't, I'm going to be young in spirit. So that whole chronological age thing. I was like, well, how do you work with people who deal with that? I know ageism is real, people discriminate against people. We live in a society that doesn't respect older people the way that they used to respect older people.
Mhm.
Sometimes older people are kind of like thrown out with the trash, or they're no longer useful or they need more attention or assistance. So that was going to be the thing. But since I wrote the book and the feedback that I've gotten from different people who
Mhm.
have read the book, has kind of like blown me away because there's something for almost anyone that's looking to change or try to come up with another way. Like it's not the answer all to every situation or to life, but some of the stuff that I got have been from younger people, from middle-aged people, from older people. So that whole age thing has totally gone away from me because I think that anybody who's open to it, like I said, you're not going to get the message until you're ready for the message. And if you're open and looking for a different way to change or maybe a tool that will help you do that, then I think it works for anyone. But the different people that have responded back, it's been something different for each one of them. It wasn't like just one thing about the book that stood
Yeah.
out, like I have a friend who's an educator. The story about the note stood out to him, and he, was like, oh, it is so true. Educators sometimes they do this and they do that. And then my sister-in-law responded, and her thing was like, I'm so sorry that you experienced so much pain when you were growing up, And she was like, these are things I didn't know about you. She's known me most of my life, but there were things that she
Mhm.
didn't know about me.
Right.
And, she was like, I'm really proud that you were able to work through them. So people seeing that whole thing where I really worked through things to make a change, so I think it's a universal message and it doesn't apply to a race, or age, or sex, or whatever. It's for anyone and
Hmm.
everyone.
Yes, it is. It really is. And I appreciate you. You mentioned your age. How old are you?
You mean chronological age or mental age?
Chronological age. You said, people like my age. What is your age? Do you
Uh,
tell? Is it a
I usually
secret?
don't because with that comes a label. And I realized that lately,
Oh,
once I reach a certain age, when
oh,
I tell people my chronological age, they right away label me and put me in certain
they
categories. And
put
I'm
you in
like,
a category.
yeah, they put me in a category based on my age. And
Okay,
like,
so
oh, you riding a bike, you're doing this, you're doing yoga. I wouldn't think someone your age would be doing that. But then someone else came to me and said, the reason why I want to know your age is because it's for reference. It's
yes.
about what I could talk to you about. Because if you're older, and people, I always like to say, well, how old do you think I am? Or how old do you want me to be? Once again, like, like, where is it important in certain situations? But,
I mean, we can find out, mister. But
I
I'm
know it's
just
out there on the internet.
on the internet will put you out there. But for me, my mother, I have this thing with age. My mom died at 45. My
Wow.
mother was 45 when she passed. I was 23. I just turned
Wow.
62 like a week or so ago. And when I tell people how old I am, to me it is just like such a major source of pride, that
Right,
I've
right,
been able
right,
to live this long.
right.
But then I think that when you're on the public stage, and I know you're a private person too, but when you're on a public stage and people are reading your book, and I love that it's volume one, people are reading your book, it helps them to know more about you. It helps them to have a better point of reference in some of the
Mhm.
things in some of the things that you're saying. Like people will say to me, "What you know about that?" And so they do. If they know
Oh,
how
yeah.
old you are, they automatically assume that. I was born in 1964, and "Stay in My Corner" by the Dells was from 1965, but it is my favorite oldie.
Mm.
So the fact that I was only a year old when that song came out doesn't mean that I am not, an avid old school head when it comes to music. I don't have to be, I didn't have to be in my teenage years or, older back then to be able to appreciate those things. But people just assume you're right. You don't know nothing about this, or you don't know nothing about that. But nowadays, too, David, you know, I think that being older is a badge of honor.
Right.
And being older, there's somebody watching and they're trying to figure out how old is he?
Mm.
Because they might be your age
Yeah.
and thinking to themselves, I could never do this. And probably you're younger than you look. And then somebody finds out that you're older and you're doing this, and you're expressing yourself, and you've created this new path, this new thing that you're doing. You've moved internationally. You published the. Is this your first book?
Yes, it is.
You published your first book. Do you know what that means for people to see
Mm.
it? When people
I
see us and they say the reason why people are coming on this tour, the reason
Mhm.
why people are now coming to places and saying before they leave, I'm investing here, is
Mhm.
because a lot of them have already seen other people do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've seen and for a lot of people, not necessarily you, but for a lot of people, it's like, I can do that too. When I
Yeah.
have my radio show, and I love to talk about, I come from such a small place in New Jersey, because even where you're from, people will
Yeah.
put you in a box there.
Oh, for sure.
It's
But
what people do.
there are two things I want to say that has to do with age.
Okay.
Uh, I'm single, but I'm dating. Okay. So, I mean,
You're single, but you what?
I'm dating. I'm like, okay. And that was
Okay.
kind of like a joke. It's like,
Okay.
so sometimes, you gotta like not rule yourself out in the dating
Yeah.
pool. I'm just kidding about that because, but I went to one of Eric's workshop, the magician who in the beginning. So he did this thing that I was not happy with him about for a long time, that he has this whole presentation that he does. And what he does is he put these squares, red squares up on a slide. And these squares represent your life. And what he does is does an average lifespan and then maybe pad a few. But then you subtract all the ones that you've already lived. And then you see how many red squares you have left. It's
Yeah.
like reality stare you in the face. Like, oh, of course, I'm beyond that point where I have more red squares than I have left. So it's kind of like this aging process for me has also been a part of acceptance. It's like, okay, like, oh, yeah, I'm at that point where my red squares are limited. So that's why I'm more focused on what brings me joy because I want to make the best of those red squares I have left.
Yep.
And the other thing about it is like, just because you're young doesn't mean you're going to live longer or you're going to live to be a ripe old age. Like you say, it's like, no, some people look at me like, oh, you're at the end of life. I'm like, well, you could be closer to the end of life than I am. But no, it's like, You know? So the whole
Yes.
thing about the aging, I think that I'm processing that in multiple ways, and And it's not like I'm ashamed of my age, but I kind of like, I don't want that to be the focus. Just like when I go in certain situations, I don't want my lifestyle to be the focus of the
Yes.
conversation. I want
Yes.
you to hear what David has to say. I don't want you to hear about all those other labels you associate with David. So, yeah, I know that it's a positive in a lot of ways when you share with people about your age because they see it as something that's really, really good and a possibility for them. But there are times when I see it like, I don't want it to be the focus. I don't want
Get
my
it.
conversation to be focused on how old I am, if that's going to be like the only thing you see about me is how old I am. I don't want that to be the focus.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to finish reading this book, and I
Yeah.
really thank you for your time, sir, and spending this
Well,
time with me.
I'm honored and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to have a conversation with you because every conversation I have with you, I leave with something. Even if it's just a
Too.
hello and a smile, I leave with something that makes me feel real good about life. And a lot of times it's something that I need. It's always something that I need that you give me,
Hmm.
which is amazing. That
Hmm.
you give me exactly what I need when you give it to me. And I agree
Hmm.
with you. Common sense is not all that common when it comes to dealing with other people. My great grandmother had a third grade
No
education, but she
more.
had more sense than most people that I've encountered. And yeah, but no, but thank you very much for the
Thank you.
opportunity. I look forward to being able to spend more time with you. I'm not going to be stalking you, but I will be more around you more. So let's get that clear, okay? And my whole problem is that sometimes I'm a little selfish, and I know that you have all these people in your life that you have to give some time to. But I hope you have a little bit of that time set aside that you'll be able to give me,
You
because
know it. You know it. You know it. You know how much I adore you,
I need that
and
in
I
writing
love
and
to.
notarized.
And I'm trying to, one of the things that I'm trying to do is get my life in the position where I do have more time just to spend with my family because that's who y'all
Mm.
become, you know. And so I love you, I love you, I love you, David. There's
Love
nothing
you
you can do
too.
about it. And
Love
for
you so much.
everybody else, I'm going to be signing off for now, but I will see you again soon. We have a lot of things going. Follow us everywhere at Black Expats in Panama, and I will see you somewhere in the world.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. And there you have it, David Hudson, creating your own labels. What a great conversation. And I hope that you can check out his book. I hope that you can be inspired by his story, to come out and, really be moving within a year and a half, moving into his brand new digs. So excited for him. Maybe he'll let us follow him once he settles in. But this is your girl, Charlotte Van Horn, Black Expats in Panama, and I will see y'all again soon. Thanks.